And we're live.
Hi.
Hello, Internet. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, you know what? We're always happy to have you. It's a joy.
It's been too long. I can't even remember when we did the last one.
We've had lots of time between
We
these.
should hang out more often.
Pre-COVID, I think. You know,
we went a little radio silent for a while too, because Angie's first trimester was pretty brutal. So
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, glad to have you back in the house.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Let's well, before we dive in, do you want to talk about anything that you've got coming up for people who are tuning in live? And
good question.
Thanks.
Let's see. What do we have? Well, it's been a little. We had to cancel 4 things just because of COVID, right?
Womp, womp. I get that. Us too.
Yeah. So, but right now we have an Art of Desire Women's Retreat that's coming up August 10th through 13th, and that's outside of Portland, Oregon. And
exciting.
It's a really great space, and we will be doing everything we can to make it as safe as possible. But there's like these sort of covered outdoor spaces, so it's that circulation of air that's very positive thing. So anyway, so that's where we've had it in the past. So that's the 10th through the 13th, and then we currently have a couples retreat scheduled for October 22nd to 28th in Jackson Hole, and we will do the first 3 days on a relationship seminar, and it's awesome. And you stay overnight there, and you have catered meals. Then everybody has Sunday off, and then there's the Sexuality seminar that's 3 days, and you can come for the whole time, or you can come for one of those two parts. So
Sounds
and then
delightful.
and then we're also in September. We had to cancel or postpone our Dallas Art of Desire workshop, which is 2 days, and we are planning to come back and do that in October. I think it's the 15th and the 16th of October. That was completely sold out. So, but I think a few people had to cancel. So I think there are a few spots left for that. So
cool. Well, we'll do our best to when we make this as a podcast in the next couple of days or a week or so, we'll link to all those things from our website so that people can get a direct link there. And you guys, since we're doing this live, if you're on, say hi. It's fun knowing that we've got a live audience, even though we're not necessarily like sitting in the room together.
Yeah, you can see them though, and I can't, right? I can't see anything.
You'll be able to see the comments, I think, if they pop in.
If not, we will pop them up on the screen.
I think on your screen in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little tab that says comments.
Oh, right. Live comments. Let me click there.
Yep. So if people comment, you'll be able to see them there, and then I can.
Oh, there we go. Hi from Colorado. Hi, Leah.
Hey, look, it's on the screen.
Oh, that's cute.
McEwens.
That's
fun.
Guys. You guys are sophisticated.
And Lindsay says
hi, Lindsay.
Lindsay says hi also. Hi, Lindsay.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Fun to know who's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Jennifer Finlayson-Fife fan club is showing up.
The 2 people.
No, we got more than 2. We got more than 2.
All right. Okay, good.
All right. Should we dive into a question?
Sure. Let's
have you read this one because this is from the husband's perspective.
Okay. This is a body image question. So, and this is not, remember when we did our last live and how I asked a question for myself?
And this is not you.
This one is not me, although contextually it could have been, but it's not.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married for several years. Arousal used to come easily, but in the past 2 years, severe depression has taken its toll on my libido. When it's not depression, it's chronic fatigue. Arousal now takes far more effort than it used to. I found things like roleplay and reading erotica have helped to overcome these hurdles. These are the things that we've done and enjoyed in the past, but have become more prevalent during the times of depression as they seem to provide a shortcut to arousal. This is helpful because as a normally high drive person, I want it, even if my body doesn't react as freely. I don't require them for arousal, but arousal doesn't happen on its own as much anymore. The problem is that my wife has put on weight in recent years, and she's often convinced that my lower libido is due to this. She often feels like the role play is my way of pretending that she was in better shape or a different person. How can I help her to know that it is a depression issue and that my role plays and erotica are being used to jumpstart my libido and are not meant to replace her? How can I help her to not feel threatened by them?
That's a good question.
That's a very noble question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a good question. And of course, the tricky thing is that you can't really, several of the questions, I think maybe even the third one we were going to look at, is about how do I make my spouse feel a certain way? And I appreciate the desire to do that. How can I reassure her? How can I make her not be anxious about her body or her desirability? And the reality is you can't really. I mean, because if the best that you can do is bring your most honest self and your most trustworthy position. And if it's really not true, being able to stand by it not being true is the most helpful thing, because it may be that your wife needs to confront her own self-rejection and her own challenge of accepting herself in, the reality of her human experience. And that even if she feels insecure, it may be something that's really up to her to resolve or to overcome. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but let me maybe go to the first part of the question, which is just, first of all, I think that is not unusual at all. If someone is feeling depressed and feeling, I talk about this in the couples sexuality course, that, Eros energy is to feel alive. It's you feeling engaged in the world. It's your creative energy. It's it's all this kind of, when you're in the process of trying to create and do and become, and that's very much connected to eroticism, is when we feel alive. And so depression is the opposite. It's that Thanatos energy, and it's kind of turning inward and being more in a when you're sort of retreating from the world. So it's not unusual when someone's in a depressive state to find it much harder to be aroused by the everyday realities that they exist in. The beauty of the world is less evident to them. The beauty of their partnership is less evident. The just who they are, their own strengths are less evident. And so, it certainly can be easy to look for more exaggerated versions of eroticism to engage those desires. Now, of course, the best version is to address as best one can the depression, and I know that's sometimes easier to say than to do, but is there something that I can do to actually, deal with my more regressive or depressive state? And of course, exercise is a big deal. Getting some input or some counseling can be a really big deal. Just how we are engaged in our lives can often be an antidepressant if we can sort of solve something, address something, create something. And so, when you're in those better places, it's easier to really have that vibrancy and that aliveness in the immediacy of their relationship. But I think, barring all that, I think is with respect to your wife, is just to be honest and say, this really is not about you. And I understand you have your own anxieties or fears about that. But I am attracted to you. I do enjoy being with you. And this is not about trying to get away from you. And if it's honest, even if it's hard for her to fully lean into it, she will recognize it as honest.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be helpful in her own grappling with her self-rejection. And in the world of women, and men have this too, but I think women get it worse, is there's just a very high demand on the aesthetic. And so, for all of us who don't meet that demand, which is even the models themselves,
Mm-hmm.
it can be very easy to be in a self-rejecting place and not allow yourself to feel sexy just for being a beautiful. By beautiful, I mean just you're beautiful because you are a lovely human being. And it's hard for us sometimes to extend that understanding of beauty to ourselves as women. And yet it's so foundational to really being at peace with ourselves, rejecting those really rigid ideals. But again, you can't make somebody see themselves the way you see them, but you can be honest about seeing them that way. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've been talking about in our house lately is how oftentimes we have a strong inner critic. Each one of us has a pretty strong inner critic. I think that's pretty common amongst most people. And I think it's really common for us to assume that other people are as critical of us as we are of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when we project those criticisms onto our partner, then we become defensive.
That's right.
with our partner
That's right.
of our own criticisms.
Yes. That's right. Yeah, there's absolutely no question about that. And I think my sister-in-law said to me once a funny joke where she said, you know, when you're in your 20s, you're very aware of what everybody thinks about you. And in your 30s, you're trying very hard to fend off what everybody thinks about you. And when you get into your 40s, you realize that nobody's been thinking about you anyway all this time.
It's so true.
That's
It's
amazing.
so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So yeah, it kind of exposes our narcissism.
And what a gift to learn that lesson a little early on, you know?
Yeah. I just remember in the first like month of being married to John, and you know, John comes from a very educated family, and so we were he was driving me to school because I was in my PhD program, and we just had one car at the time, and so he I said something and he corrected my grammar. Okay, now I kind of already had an insecurity about this. Am I intelligent enough for this family, right? So he says, "Oh yeah, I think actually it's." And John's a very kind person. He's not like, you know, you said it wrong. I mean, he's very like as nice about it as anybody could be. He was saying, "I think it's actually, you know, you're supposed to say it like this." And by the time I'm getting out of the car, I'm like, "Are you sorry you married me?" You know, it's like, no, nothing to do with it. But you know, it's like hitting an insecurity that I had, and so you know, then I'm handling it by the defensive-ness and sort of seeing the self-rejection getting projected onto him. And so anyway, so
yeah. I think it might be helpful for husband in this situation to be able to just like acknowledge, like call that out in a gentle way.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I'm going to be really honest with you right now. I really think it's my depression that's kind of kicking me into this place. And I know you may not be feeling great about yourself right now, and you might have a little bit of a harsh inner critic. And I just don't want to be responsible. Like, I don't want your inner critic to be my voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, I love you exactly for who you are. And that could, I think, give her a nudge to, because he's confronting some things obviously by himself, and that could give her a little bit of a nudge to confront some things about herself as well.
Yeah, I remember there was a time when Nate did that to me when I was expressing what I was frustrated about him with, and he was able to call me out and say, you know, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way, but I also can't be responsible for the story that you're telling yourself right now. And that gave me, like he was saying, the nudge to think, oh, this really is the story that I'm telling myself. This is me projecting onto Nate.
Yeah.
So having him tell me that was just a gentle nudge in the right direction. Because
absolutely.
Like you said, you can't really control what your wife is thinking.
And if this husband is sincere, like I really do, I am not attracted to my wife, meaning I'm attracted to her. I don't find that to be a problem. Well, then it's a real gift. And it's certainly, I would certainly be straight up and honest about that. I mean, I know in the beginning of the marriage, I also sort of was bringing my own anxieties about that. Yeah. And my husband was just able to say, like, I find you 100% attractive. It is absolutely in you. And you could put on 40 pounds and I would still find you attractive. So it was like, it just allowed me to say, okay, I'm doing this thing to myself that I need to grow out of, because I'm limiting my own joy. I'm limiting my own happiness. I'm limiting my ability to receive love from my spouse. So yeah.
Can I chase that down a rabbit hole a little bit? I don't want to go down a whole other tangent, but like, what if there is some truth to the fact that maybe the attraction has dwindled a little bit? Because I know that's a reality for some couples.
Yeah.
And like, where's the kind of the gray area between being brutally honest in a tactless way and addressing the issue and still, like, you don't want to lie either. So
yeah, well, you also want to figure out what's the source of the issue, because is it about, you know, did you marry somebody who was fit and took good care of himself or herself, and then through the marriage they've really just phoned it in, and they are going to seed, and they're kind of in an irresponsible position? Because then I think the lack of attraction has some merit in that you may say, I really fully choose you, but you have kind of lost yourself in a foundational way, well, it's very hard to be attracted to that because there is a kind of a self-betrayal that you're witnessing, and it's being evidenced through their relationship to life and to their body and to you. And so that, I think, I don't know that I would start with, hey, I'm not attracted. I think what I might start with is saying, it feels like you don't want to sort of take up your responsibility to yourself and to your life. And it's really impacting the marriage. Cool. And it's impacting kind of the connection we can have because you're lost between us. And do I play a role in that? Right. Because sometimes lack of attraction is about a self-betrayal on the part of the person that you don't feel attracted to. And there may be a physical element, but I think there's more. I remember in that same conversation, what my husband said to me is, you are attractive to me. And he said, the only thing that would be hard for me is if you were in a self-hating position.
Yeah.
Right. That would be harder to find because the life would go out in a sense. And so it's much harder to find that, attractive and engaging. But I think what happens for a lot of people though, is they just have a kind of narrow view of love. And so I think it can be easy to not find attractive if you think your spouse just doesn't care. But if you are saying like, is this about me just not accepting who my spouse is, wanting in a way the superficial that I find engaging or that they look good next to me? And so I'm being critical and I'm in a critical stance. A lot of people I work with do that. They're in a critical stance towards their spouse. They want sort of narcissistic reinforcement in the relationship. And the aging of their spouse or the fact their spouse has had children or whatever is not readily doing that for them. And so, but they don't sort of look through to the core of the person and really value that person. Because, that's really, it's that sense of two people who hold a sense of their mattering and the mattering of the other person. That's really the foundational charge of a good sexual relationship. And, you don't want to let go of yourself and not care. I think that can be negligent in its own way in a marriage. But I think, can I really allow room for you to be human and, to gain weight and to have growing gray hair like I do and still, embrace you as a whole person. So I think I would be looking at, is this about my narcissism and my selfishness? Is this about a spouse who's really not caring?
Yeah.
Right. And, sometimes I've said to my spouse, like, it is hard for me if I feel like you don't get, my husband's an engineer, mathematic, you know what I mean? He's not somebody who's fashion conscious. And there are moments where his hair is like not even combed and
hey.
We were at a ward activity and we're sitting there. It was like a Saturday morning breakfast thing.
Yeah.
And this other couple walks by and he says, see, John Finlayson didn't comb his hair, kind of like, I didn't have to comb.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, so there have been times when I've like, if you do just a little, it helps a lot, it helps a lot. And I think that's okay because it's a way of inviting, it's not like a foundational critique. It's a way of saying, I like having to not remind myself that I love you when I look at you.
That's a good way to put it.
Oh, that was well said. Well, I think everybody listening sometimes wishes they could just carry a little earbud in their ear that just has a direct line to Jennifer Finlayson-Fife to help us through some of these conversations and remind us how to think to talk to each other. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Should we jump on to another question?
Sure. It's very similar, I think. Yeah.
Are you okay if I keep toggling between these screen views? I know.
Yeah, it's fine. Whatever cool. You all want is fine.
All right. Next question. You want to handle this one?
Yes, I will do this one. This feels like I could have written this question, but I didn't. All right. Here it says. This is what it says. Thank you for all you do. My husband and I are huge fans of Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. We've taken your courses and they've changed our lives for the better. We've been married for 11 years and have 2 small children, and I'm currently pregnant with our 3rd child. While my husband and I have made great strides in our sexual relationship and I have taken monumental steps to claim my sexuality, I feel that my pregnancy has made me regress. I'm so thankful to be able to carry children, but I do not feel sexually aroused while pregnant. My husband is so kind and tells me I'm beautiful, so the problem is not how he sees me. The problem is how I see myself. I tend to gain a lot of weight during pregnancy, which then takes me about a year to lose. With the weight gain, the fluctuating emotions, and how tired I become, sex is just not something I'm interested in. Body image is a huge factor in this. I would like to be more intimate with my husband without feeling anxiety about my changing body. How can I feel sexual while pregnant? I'm sure I'm not the only woman who feels this way. Girl, I feel you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. And I was the same way. I'm on the smaller side, but I would put on like a full 40 plus pounds in pregnancy. And because I'm framed as a little smaller, it just, you felt like you had 3 babies inside. So,
Right.
And so it can be, I mean, just for starters, it's such a rapid transition in your own sense of your body. It's changing so quickly. You're getting so much larger, it's doing it to you in a way, and so you're along for the ride in a way, in pregnancy. And so you have a kind of a self-concept that's in flux, especially for a first pregnancy, I think, when you're not accustomed to all those changes. And so it can be really kind of challenging, I think, to your sense of yourself. But then I think even more so, and I think this is more true for women than for many men, I think many men can find a pregnant woman, a pregnant wife, very attractive. It's sort of this fertility and it's like the fertility and the beauty of this amazing body that can produce another human being, and evidence of the husband's fertility even, and so I think for women we have these kind of anorexic versions that are the ideal. And so and I think because we're given this idea that the maternal is non-sexual and non-erotic, well, when you look in the mirror, you feel very, very maternal because you are. But often what we then imagine or think is this is against being sexy, as opposed to, I think, a much more self-accepting view, which is this is an evidence of my profound sexuality and my erotic self. And so we have a self-concept that sometimes motherhood precludes sexiness. There is the other factor, which those questioners bringing up, in that there's the tiredness and the fatigue, and often not being able to do the things in your life that you would normally do that make you feel alive and happy, and so there is this, pregnancy for some can definitely be a labor of love. I mean, it can be a hard 9 months for a lot of people. So depending on how you relate to pregnancy, because some people never feel more alive than when they're pregnant. But for those that really feel burdened by it, or that feels like their ankles are swelling and they don't feel like themselves, well, I guess I would just sort of in some ways normalize that it's a challenge, and having some compassion for yourself around the fact that it's not lending itself easily to your sense of your own attractiveness is fair, and it's fine. I think, though, you can work with yourself a bit, because it sounds like this person's taken the Art of Desire course and she feels like she's really given herself a lot more room to claim her sexuality. And I think this is just another area where she could invite herself to look at herself differently, that my pregnant body is evidence of its amazingness. It's incredible that this body of mine can produce another human being, and it knows what to do. And this is a tribute to my body, and I don't need to denigrate it through some crazy idea of thinness that would be unhealthy right now if I were unhealthy for a pregnancy. And I want to learn to really accept and love and see the beauty that is in my body right now. And it's a way of seeing. It's like teaching yourself to see at a higher level, and to kind of not let this sort of template that's been pounded into us run the show. It's like a self-betraying template as opposed to a self-embracing template. The other thing, I remember when I was like in my second pregnancy and we were trying to have the baby be born. And so we were trying to have sex a lot because I wanted that baby to come because I was going to graduate from my PhD program. And so I was telling my sister, I'm like, yeah, we're really trying. I'm, drinking all the teas you're supposed to drink. We keep having sex. And she's like, that's amazing that you can have sex, that you can feel like having sex. And I'm like, she's like, how can you do that when you look like I'm like walking around like this. And she's like, and I said, well, I just imagine I'm skinny.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, that is some imagination you've got.
There you go.
But, I think it's okay if it helps you to just imagine, in my mind in sex, I'm always perkier and younger,
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's okay. It's helpful. It's so, I think we're naturally drawn to youthfulness and perkiness and so on. And so it's okay to, I think, play with your own fantasy in a sense as a way of, some people might say that's a self-rejection, but I don't see it like that. It's more like, I can just go to the ideas that are sexy for me, and I can just give myself permission in whatever state I'm in to be able to enjoy sexuality and being with my spouse.
Well, I feel like life in general is just your perspective. So
yes,
if the story you're telling yourself is helping you feel sexier and helping you enjoy it more, then why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
100%.
I also think we sometimes have a negative relationship with fantasy in our culture.
Yes, we do. Yes.
And I think it's sometimes seen as like a dirty thing or a bad thing. Yeah. And I think that there's lots of different types of fantasy, and that
fantasy, and what's its purpose? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's its purpose, and is it helpful? It can be. It definitely I feel like fantasies are neutral. Just like money is neutral, or just like, there's all, it's just a tool that you can use for good or not good.
Yeah, that's right. And exactly. I talk about this in the couples sexuality course, where, human beings are always creating meaning. And so fantasy is basically that. What are the meanings, essentially, or the stories that create arousal in you? And certainly people can use fantasy as a way to block out the reality of their partner, or as a way to not collaborate in their partnership. And they can also engage in fantasies that are sort of self-denigrating or denigrating of another person, right? Mm-hmm. So, but like you say, the fact of fantasy is neutral. What is it creating? Because you can also work with fantasy as a way to create more desire and create a story between you and your spouse. It's a kind of intimacy in and of itself.
Absolutely.
And a way of playing together. You can play with a meaning and experience different parts of yourself through the playing with that meaning. But it's intimate in the sense that you're playing together. It's grown-up play, right? But it's very fun play. And it's a way of, as human beings, we want what's the word? We want commitment and we want consistency, but we also want novelty. Mm-hmm. And so in the happiest marriages, there's a way of creating novelty together that doesn't interfere with the bond and the security.
Yeah. And
so fantasy can be a fun way to do that, which is, I've sometimes said this in some of my workshops, like if I'm lying next to my husband and my head somewhere else and he's just touching me, I might, say, this is a way to invoke a meaning that I might say, I really should get going, so I'm invoking, the meaning of the forbidden, that, I really shouldn't be here. And then, and so that's one version, but he might say, no, just 1 more minute, just stay 1 more minute. Yeah. and so then as soon as it's in the forbidden, well, I love the forbidden. So I love playing with the forbidden. So then it's immediately like my body responds to that and so on. So it's like, but it's a way of coming together and pretending and being ridiculous together.
Yeah, we get it. Like I think one of the things that we enjoy doing is saying like, hey, let's pretend that this is like before we were married.
Yeah.
And like we can make out, but we maybe like can't take each other's clothes off or touch each other in the places that we wouldn't touch each other if we were dating.
Exactly.
And it builds up this tension, and it builds up this kind of like sense of forbidden. And it's always like super fun and sexy. Like it's a fun way. We're not betraying our values, and we're not betraying who we are, but we're inviting a sense of playfulness, which I think I think playfulness is one of those things that kind of makes you human.
Oh, 100%.
When you lose your playfulness, you lose.
Kids get it, and adults often let go of it. That's right. And the barriers to access are a big part of eroticism. And so when marriage makes sex very legal, right, and even obligatory, now you're supposed to have sex. That's how a lot of women can relate to it, and some men too. But then immediately it takes it out of the adventure of it. So playing with some of those ideas can be very helpful for people.
Love it.
Yeah.
So going back to this idea of pregnancy affecting the sex life, I found for me, the nausea was an issue. Yeah. And then I think just the changing of the hormones was an issue.
Sure.
So
100%.
What can someone do when it's like physical things that are affecting?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up because, and people have, there's quite a wide range. Like some people are just deathly ill. Okay. And thinking about having sex is just not going to be happening because if the body's physically ill, right, that sex is going to come. You have to be in a healthy position actually, really, to want to have sex. It's a secondary thing. The other thing is some people have so much hormonal, they're sensitive to the hormonal fluctuations, and it can really kill libido for some people, independent of any self-perception they might have. Some women actually have a greatly increased arousal because they have increased blood flow throughout the whole body, and this is also in the vulvar area. And so then they feel much more just what many men feel is kind of arousal when you're not even thinking about sex, just like you see your body is aroused. And so there is that whole range. And I'm not enough of an expert to know if you're having the kind of hormonal sensitivities and shifts, that kind of is a foundational issue. And so it probably would mean talking to your OBGYN about that you are having a lot of a physical response, and I don't know how much can safely be done to kind of stabilize your body's response to it. So that is definitely another factor. And a lot of it's just being kind to yourself in all this, because it's a lot of change and a lot of even change in self-perception and perception of who you are as a couple, and added stress, and marriage is an adventure. And so you have to sort of see it as such. Like,
for sure,
a lot of things that we can't control, and can we stay compassionate to ourselves and each other in all of this?
And that was something that we just kind of had to do, was when we were in the throngs of the nausea, and even having him cuddle up to me was too much. We just had to have that conversation of, hey, this isn't going to be forever. This is the next little while. And just kind of
show each other a little compassion.
100%.
But speaking to it, not just avoiding the issue, but actually having a conversation about it was really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Good.
Should we go on to the next question?
Sure. Should we look at anything that people have said here?
We got Mike said it's like movie. This is from earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Where she is heavy but super attractive because of her confidence, but she's only confident when she has an accident. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly.
But it was her confidence that added to her attractiveness.
Because she couldn't see how she was actually seen, but she was so confident. It's lovely. Yeah.
And then Amanda said, I like having to not remind myself that I love you when I look at you. That was your little quote.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Self-care goes a long way.
Yeah, that's right.
It does. So true.
Yep, exactly.
Should we? So we have one more question to go through. Should we let the audience decide what we talk about?
Sure, go for it. I'm happy to answer them.
Would you guys rather hear a question about pornography or a question about polygamy? Contextually.
Maybe say what the question is.
Yeah, like contextually, the question about polygamy is more about. She said, or he or she says, I only learned about Joseph Smith's polygamy, the doctrine of polygamy, as explained in the scriptures, and its extent in our temple dealings about 15 years ago. It had a profound effect on how I view myself, my marriage, and God. And I'm fearful of dying and resent this view of women. When I ask family or friends how they cope with this, they say they just don't think about it. I find myself trying to be perfect so I don't get replaced. Can you help me? Excuse me. Wow.
Just drank
my Dr. Pepper just snuck up on me again. Can you help me move past this fear so that I can more fully enjoy my marriage? And then the one about pornography. We're getting mixed. Polygamy, pornography. Polygamy, pornography.
Polygamy.
Okay, let's hear the pornography question. Make sure people still agree with it.
Yeah, okay. That was up here. And the pornography question is: several years ago, I told my wife I was having a problem with pornography, and I was able to get help and had not viewed pornography in over 3 years. While I'm doing better, our relationship has not improved. My wife still gets triggered and will withdraw from me emotionally and physically. I will respond by withdrawing as well. During these bad times, we will go multiple weeks without sex. It seems like my wife is withholding sex as punishment for any behavior. When we finally do have sex, it seems like she is having sex to reward good behavior and not because she actually wants sex. How do I help her stop using sex as an incentive for punishment?
Or punishment.
Or yeah, incentive or punishment.
Okay.
Gosh, it's like back and forth. Maybe we'll save one question.
We'll do one of these next time. So should we go with
it? Looks like polygamy.
Let's go with the polygamy
is
question.
The majority vote.
Okay, we'll do polygamy, and then we'll do
porn.
Maybe next time we'll do all porn.
That was a fun little experiment we just did.
That's good to know that both topics are important to people.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in this polygamy aspect. It's not something that we hear talked about very often because it's like she said in here, when I ask my friends or family, they just say they don't think about it or that everything will work out in the end. But sometimes that kind of an answer is not enough.
Right, exactly. Do you mind just reading the question now again?
Yeah.
Because so I can really think about it. Yeah.
I only learned about Joseph Smith's polygamy, the doctrine of polygamy as explained in the scriptures, and its extent in our temple dealings about 15 years ago. It has had a profound effect on how I view myself, my marriage, and God. I'm fearful of dying and resent this view of women. When I ask family or friends how they cope with this, they say they just don't think about it, or say they know in the next life it'll be perfect. I find myself trying to be perfect so I don't get replaced. Can you help me move past this fear so I can more fully enjoy my marriage?
Okay. It's a really, really, really important question. And I think that, first of all, there's a book that Carolyn Pearson wrote a few years ago called The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. I'm not saying quite right. I think that's right. The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. Eternal's in there somewhere. Ghost is in there somewhere. I don't mean to be dismissive about the book, but she writes about this kind of haunting reality over the psyches of a lot of LDS women, where there is this anxiety that this is the higher law. And this really does, even though we don't talk about it much anymore, this is the defining framing of marriage for God. And people that are good can get their heads around it, and those of us that aren't good don't like it. And that's how I think a lot of people who feel about it. Now, I do think it's true. There's a lot of Latter-day Saints who don't really think about it. They just believe, you know what, I'm not going to worry about it, and I'm sure God is a compassionate God, and it's going to be fine. And they, in some ways, they don't take it very seriously to their benefit, I think. But I've certainly worked with other people who take their faith very seriously, and so they take these ideas seriously, and then they really do impact how they feel about being a woman and about how God must see them. And so they really get into these binds because on the one hand, they have a sense of God loving them and caring for them and that they matter. But then they have this other idea that the actual architecture of marriage in the most, in God's view, is that one woman is not enough for one man. And that women, a good man is worthy of multiple women. That's that kind of idea. And so there's kind of two versions of this. I did a podcast with Carolyn Pearson, if somebody wants to listen to more thinking on this topic, which I think is called Intimacy in Mormon Marriages. If you Google my name and you Google that title, you would find that podcast. But two versions that I've seen in my clinical work is a woman, this is one version of it, where she just, like the person writing this question, just was terrified of her husband. In fact, I've had many women who talk about this. They're terrified of their husband dying. Of them dying prior to their husband, because then he would remarry and then they would be forced to share him. And then it would actively interfere with how much they wanted to open their heart up to their spouse now, because they felt there was always this option, this legitimate option for him to pull in another woman, right? And for that to actually happen at some point. And so it really, and one particular couple I worked with, it just would really upset her. She worked in the temple. She took all these ideas very seriously. And her husband would say to her, I promise you, I don't want to have another wife. I want it to be just you and me. And like, while she trusted that and she believed him, she really had a hard time getting her head around who is God, that God thinks that's okay. Oh, suddenly my microphone. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
I muted myself because I sneezed.
Got it. Okay.
I didn't want to disrupt, and then I ended up disrupting anyway. You were on a roll.
Exactly. So another version of it, and this is a darker version where the husband is actually talking to the wife about the future and what kind of second, third, and fourth wife she might be interested in including in their marriage in the next life.
Yeah.
Okay. And, this one particular client, was going and talking to her stake president about the fact that, my husband thinks this way. And her stake president was just like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But this is this fundamental kind of inequality that's operating in the marriage. And in my view, that's a really big deal, because if you're not on equal footing, you can't create an intimate marriage.
Yeah.
Meaning, when women 100 years ago couldn't vote, couldn't own land, couldn't earn money in any similar fashion that a man could, you can't really have an intimate partnership, because one has way more power than the other one does in the marriage. So you can't collaborate. I mean, I don't mean that everybody was abusive, every man was abusive, but you don't have a kind of foundational equal footing that is fundamental to the ability to create an intimate, open-hearted partnership, because there's a architectural inequality that's built right in. And so I think one of the things I talk about a lot in my relationship course is that a lot of times people have really created a psychological inequality. The man is it's not always the man, but one person in the marriage is the dominant one, the strong one. What they want happens, or they dominate through their insecurities and anxieties. What I need, feel, think, everybody must do and accommodate. And whenever you have a system that revolves more around one person, it creates unhealthiness throughout the marriage. So anyway, gosh, I feel like I'm talking about myself a lot tonight. I don't know why, but I know, I'm somebody no complaints. Okay. I didn't get married till I was 29 years old, and a lot of people were worried about me. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't was I was terrified of that foundational inequality. I wanted to be married. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to have a family. But I was really afraid of locking myself into something where I was not going to really have equal footing. And hence the name. Okay. Yeah. Meaning I didn't just take my husband's name, we took each other's names. And so when I dated John for 3 years before we got married. And I really think, for me, when I look back on that time, that what was really happening for me is I was eradicating the doctrine of polygamy from my heart. That's what was happening. I mean, that's a kind of broad way of saying what I mean by this, but I had a stronger and stronger clarity within me and in my relationship with God that the highest version of marriage was a true partnership, and that I could be a true partner, and that I could occupy that position confidently. And I could, because of the kind of person John was, for sure, but also that I could confidently see myself in a different way. But that's very much the kind of internal work I was doing to be able to really step in and truly choose him and be chosen by him. And so, I'm not going to, polygamy may have served a purpose for a time. It may have had a larger purpose in the building of the kingdom of God. But I think very much the way that Eugene England wrote about in one of his early essays, that the highest version of marriage is one of one man and one woman, of a really equal partnership, even if polygamy has had any kind of a utilitarian value. I think it interferes with the larger goal of intimacy in marriage.
Mhm.
So it means giving yourself permission to wrestle with your own understanding of God and of yourself. You know, I know as a child, I had this sense of God who loved me and valued me, and then I learned about polygamy, and it kind of was like, wait, maybe I misunderstand who I am. And I had this division that I really did wrestle with for a long time until I got more confident in my experience of God.
I'm really glad that you framed it in this way that kind of requires taking back your own personal authority
Yes.
in your with your faith and with your testimony and with your belief.
Yes.
Because I think it can make some people uncomfortable to think, like, for me personally, I just don't believe in polygamy. That's just not something that I choose to believe in. And I don't, again, I think that might make some people uncomfortable, but it's something that you just have to be able to wrestle within yourself.
Yep.
And come to terms with it and trust that the Spirit will help you with your own personal authority to find that.
Well, and something that happened on my mission was that one of the things I really got a testimony of was that God valued my honest pursuit of truth over a kind of blind compliance to an idea. And that doesn't mean, you know, I've always been a relatively compliant person. That is to say, I'm happy to go along if it's not going against something foundational in me. But that really gave me permission to be an honest pursuit, because if I I'm sure I've gotten lots of things wrong. I'm confident. Okay.
Right.
Because I'm just a flawed human in a process here. I know I've gotten lots of things wrong. But there's all kinds of things I still can't even see that I've gotten wrong.
Yeah.
And I still believe that that's okay with God. What God values is intention. You know, I think about this in parenting. What constitutes a good parent is not a parent who gets everything right, because you can't. You won't. I mean, first of all, you've never done it before, and each child you love is unique in their own way. And you also come with your own blind spots and your own history, and you're often doing your best, and it may not seem like it's very good, okay? But what I think is your best is that you're willing to honestly and earnestly pursue the good, even if you do it imperfectly, because it's about your willingness to repent, to see, to try, to strive. It's like you're reaching for the good, even if imperfectly. That in and of itself creates goodness. That in and of itself is an act of faith. And that's the best we have down here as human beings in a world in which we are looking through a glass darkly. But it's that pursuit that matters. And I really, really believe in a God who values that, because it's been my experience. And then when you do start to live more in the truth, you get to taste the fruit of that. You know it because of what it creates in your life. So I think we don't need to be so afraid of, am I getting this right or wrong, because we have limited understanding. But what do I really believe feels true and feels right and feels godly, and and to tolerate that imperfect process.
I love that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal way to frame that.
I think it's relevant just really quickly to mention that we kind of call ourselves the children of Israel, and the word Israel means one who wrestles with God.
Yeah.
And like we are we kind of have given ourselves this title, or God has given us this title of, we are the children of who wrestle with God. Like we're supposed to wrestle with things.
Yes.
Like we're not the children of people who go with the flow, or the children of people who just obey what we're told. We're supposed to wrestle with things. Like that's, I think one of the things that I've learned in recent years in my life is all growth requires resistance.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people who will go to the gym and they'll face resistance with their muscles, or they'll go to therapy and they'll face resistance with their emotions.
Yes.
They'll go to school and face resistance with their mind, but then facing resistance with their faith and confronting things that are difficult and challenging is something that they shy away from.
Yeah, we feel like we're doing something wrong, because if
Yeah.
we really were faithful, we would know everything, because that's sort of a narrative we have
Yeah.
that I think interferes. Yes.
Or we
Which
wouldn't
is-
question.
Which is
Yes,
why I
that's
really
right.
appreciate interviews like this with you, because you do bring forward this opportunity for people to wrestle in a safe space. Like, we get to talk about conversations like polygamy, and we're not just going to rub it off and give it the easy Sunday school answer that things will just work out in heaven and we just don't know everything. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay to wrestle. We're supposed to wrestle.
Yes.
I love this comment by Amanda. She says, I think it affects us, like the polygamy conversation, because we lack counter information about our Heavenly Mother.
Yeah.
It would be easier to dismiss if her identity was a little bit
Yeah.
more clear, just as Heavenly Father's is. And
Yes.
she goes on and says, I think the idea that polygamy exists at all is very troubling to some of us. The idea that our Heavenly Mother isn't equal in power, purpose, and ability to our Heavenly Father is concerning, especially
Absolutely.
when we talk about how we're supposed to be equal in marriage. And
Yes.
yeah,
Right. And we don't, and that's a kind of archetype that represents a foundational inequality.
yeah,
And so it is a problem. I mean, the beauty of our theology is we believe in a mother and father in heaven, and we talk about them as co-equals and co-creators. But the way that, at least culturally and, formally, we've related to this idea is in that kind of Victorian traditional idea of
Yeah.
the man's out front, the woman's background, and that model has certainly been evident through the polygamy discussion.
Yeah.
But here we are in an imperfect process, and Zion is something we create. It's something that we're going to grow into if we can stay open and keep growing as a people, keep wrestling with God. I was listening to something last night. It's a program on BYU TV called Artful, and I'm going to destroy this artist's name, which I feel really bad about. I think it's Brian Keshnek or something like that. I think he's a fairly popular LDS artist, Mormon
as far as
artist.
we're concerned, you nailed it.
I feel bad because I don't want to I can't say his name right now, but he was talking about this idea of wrestling, that the creative process, even in art, it's not you just look at a blank canvas and wait for revelation to come, that instead you're in this sort of conversation with the universe, you're wrestling. And he says, inspiration and creativity and even, this a sort of a divinity that comes through you through the struggle. He's like, that's when the greatness comes. And so it's like, a lot of times we're waiting for answers. And I think God really wants us to roll up our sleeves and wrestle and struggle and take a position, right? Because often you can't know if it's right or wrong until you dare to take a position
Right.
in your marriage, in your life, And so I think God expects us to take more honest, heartfelt risk in the world, as a way of being co-creators of goodness with our parents in heaven.
Right. And again, like you said, when you take a stance, sometimes that's when you learn, okay, maybe this wasn't the right stance.
That's right.
And maybe this is the right stance. And to not be afraid of taking that first step.
That's right.
Because I know in my life, sometimes I've been paralyzed by that indecisiveness just because of that fear of making the wrong choice.
Exactly.
That's
exactly right. As I think perfectionism is like counterfeit righteousness, because perfectionism interferes with faith, like the pursuit of and tolerance of getting things wrong. That's foundational to growing.
So let's take that statement right there and loop it right back into just like putting a button or a bow on this question. So this woman who's facing polygamy, which we've done a really good job at, in the time that we've been given, we've kind of played with it a little bit. So if this woman who asked this question is feeling pressure to be perfect, if she's feeling pressure that or fear that she might be replaced, what is the wrestle that she needs to take on in order to maybe feel a little bit more peace or stability in this relationship?
Well, it's kind of I'm glad you're bringing it back because I got to answer the question. But I think that what in some ways I'm saying is that I think she owes herself some challenge to the view of God she's been handed.
Mm-hmm.
And that the wrestle might be of who does she think God is? Because there's something in the view she's been handed that doesn't sit well with her soul. And she needs to, a lot of us are worshiping a God we've been handed, not God.
Yeah.
And so that wrestle allows you to start to know a truer understanding of God, even if the God in my head is truer than the one that I wrestled with at age 12, but it's still not God. That is, and so coming to know God is part of your own development. But I think the fact that the woman writing the question is saying something is not right with my soul, the idea that I have to earn my husband's love, there's something wrong with this, that I am anxiously trying to make sure I don't get replaced, that even if you don't ever get replaced or someone else added to the marriage in that way, there's still something foundationally off about being in a relationship to your spouse in that frame. And so I think that it's worth thinking about, is this really a true idea? Because it doesn't seem to be yielding good fruit.
Yeah. Is this, it may be less about you being imperfect or having issues because you can't tolerate or don't like this doctrine. And it could be more that the definition of God that you've been handed is actually mistaken, not that there's something wrong with you.
Yes, right.
I love that. I love that we can shift that away from I'm broken. The I'm broken towards this limited. There's a podcast we listened to a couple years ago with Rob Bell and some theologist from Ireland. He was amazing. And the thing that really stuck with me is they said, we believe in this God who is all powerful and our creator and has in the moment we put a definition on God is the moment we put limits on God.
Yeah. Put him in a box.
And as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we are very good at defining God and putting God in a box.
Yeah,
when the moment you put God in a box is the moment that you put limits on God, and the moment you put limits on God is the moment he stops being God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's good. And as human beings, we're good at boxes. And we don't tolerate ambiguity well, and we don't do compassion well, even to ourselves, because seldom are we broken. I mean, usually there's just something we haven't yet learned that would allow us to be more freed up. And so the courage to pursue a truer view of yourself even often takes tremendous courage, but the reward is the joy of living in greater truth. So, yeah.
Love it.
I love that. Thank you.
As always, a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. It was great.
We like doing this with you. And next time we talk, we'll talk about porn.
We'll start.
Which is something that we have something that we've never talked with you about. I don't know. You've probably done past Ask a Mormon Sex Therapist where you talk a little bit about porn. This specific question is a really
that's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah, maybe we can go from the heights of spiritual pursuit to porn.
But we'll probably uncover some heights of spiritual pursuit within that conversation as well.
I'm sure we will. So that would be
awesome.
Good.
Well, thank you very much. Okay. And we'll publish this on the podcast feed soon.
Yep.
And thanks to everybody who tuned in live. We had a good 20-25 people here hanging out with us, listening to this conversation. So if you enjoyed it, share it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.